Detroit was not building cars, it was forging weapons. The Boss 429 Mustang and the ZL1 Camaro stood at the absolute edge of sanity. These machines were not created to please customers, they were created to satisfy egos and humiliate rivals. This was a proxy war fought on drag strips where reputations were shattered overnight. Ford declared war with the Boss 429. Born from NASCAR politics, it was an engine so violent and overbuilt that it scared sanctioning bodies into rewriting the rules. To make it legal, they stuffed it into a Mustang, creating a hostile industrial machine that felt less like transportation and more like a threat. Chevrolet responded with something even more dangerous. The ZL1 Camaro was an aluminum-hearted executioner designed to end races quickly. It was a drag strip assassin wearing license plates that existed only because dealers exploited loopholes to unleash it. When these two titans appeared, insurance companies panicked and grown men stepped back. One represented endurance and brute force. The other represented speed and surgical destruction. This was not just a rivalry between brands, it was a clash of philosophies. And when they finally lined up, the quarter mile did what it always does. It told the truth. The truth of this battle lives under the hood. Not in badges, not in rumors, not in bench racing lies whispered in parking lots. It lives in iron, aluminum, fuel, and fire. The Boss 429 was never meant to be elegant. It was engineered like siege equipment. Its massive block carried semi-hemispherical cylinder heads so wide that Ford had to redesign the entire front end of the Mustang just to make them fit. This engine displaced 429 cubic inches and breathed through a single Holley 4-barrel carburetor that fed air like a storm front rolling across the plains. The compression ratio sat above 11:1, demanding premium fuel and absolute commitment from the driver. Ford claimed this engine produced 375 horsepower. Nobody who had ever stood near one believed that number. Independent testing told a different story. On engine dynos that did not answer to marketing departments, the Boss routinely delivered power, approaching 500 horsepower at the crank. Torque arrived hard and early, cresting around 450 pounds-feet. But the price was weight. Massive iron heads and a reinforced block pushed the nose of the Mustang down, loading the front suspension like an anvil. This was an engine built to survive sustained violence, not quick sprints. Across the battlefield sat something far more sinister. The ZL1 427 Camaro carried an aluminum big block that felt almost unreal for its time. Chevrolet engineers stripped weight wherever possible, creating an engine that displaced 427 cubic inches, yet weighed hundreds of pounds less than the Boss. Its compression ratio climbed to nearly 12:1. This was not a suggestion, it was a warning. The ZL1 demanded racing fuel, or it would destroy itself without mercy. Chevrolet officially rated the ZL1 at 430 horsepower. That figure was a deliberate act of deception. Real dyno results revealed output between 540 and 560 horsepower. Numbers that belonged to race cars, not street machines. Torque matched the Boss on paper, but the delivery was different. Where the Ford engine felt like a slow-building earthquake, the Chevrolet hit like an explosion. The power band was narrower, sharper, and far more dangerous. Weight became the silent killer in this comparison. The Boss-powered Mustang tipped the scales near 3,900 pounds. The ZL1 Camaro undercut that by hundreds. Less mass meant quicker acceleration. Less mass meant shorter elapsed times. Less mass meant that every pound-foot of torque did more damage. These engines did not simply make power, they expressed intent. The Boss 429 promised durability, dominance, and intimidation. The ZL1 promised speed, destruction, and no second chances. One was built to endure, the other was built to win now. And when engines like these meet, theory dies. Only the quarter mile survives. The first real confrontation did not happen in a boardroom or on a glossy magazine cover. It happened where reputations lived or died. A drag strip on a warm night in late 1969, concrete soaked with rubber, air thick with fuel and expectation, two cars rolling slowly toward the lights, each carrying the weight of an entire brand on its rear tires. The Boss 429 Mustang staged first. The engine idled with a deep mechanical hostility, shaking the car as if it wanted to tear itself free. This was not a friendly idle. It was uneven, aggressive, and heavy. When the driver brought the revs up, the front of the car lifted slightly, reminding everyone watching just how much iron sat over the front axle. This Mustang did not feel eager. It felt patient, dangerous in a slow, deliberate way. The lights dropped. The boss left the line hard but not clean. The weight fought back. Rear tires clawed for grip as torque slammed into the drivetrain. There was wheel spin, then hook. First gear stretched longer than expected. The engine pulled with relentless force, the sound deep and violent, but acceleration built instead of exploding. Halfway down the track, the Mustang was moving fast, but it was working for every foot. The ZL1 Camaro staged next. Its idle was sharper, higher, almost nervous. This engine did not wait. It hunted. When the driver brought the revs up, the entire car vibrated like it was barely being restrained. Aluminum block. Massive compression. A motor built to detonate fuel, not negotiate with it. Green light. The Camaro launched like it had been struck by lightning. Less weight meant instant response. The rear tires bit hard, and the car surged forward violently, the front end snapping upward as horsepower overwhelmed physics. By 60 feet, the gap was already forming. By the 8th mile, the difference was undeniable. The Boss 429 crossed the quarter mile in approximately 13.5 seconds at roughly 106 miles per hour. A serious number, a fast car by any standard of the era, but it was not enough. The ZL1 Camaro tore through the traps in approximately 12.0 seconds at nearly 120 miles per hour. Not just quicker, devastatingly quicker. The difference was not a fender or a door. It was daylight. Spectators did not cheer, they stared. What they had just seen rewrote assumptions. The Boss had power, real power. But the ZL1 had something else. Power without weight. Power without hesitation. Power applied instantly and without mercy. This was the moment the truth became unavoidable. The quarter mile had spoken, and it had chosen violence over endurance. In drag racing, nothing is absolute. Change one variable, and the entire story bends. Gear ratio, tire compound, driver confidence. What looked settled can become chaos in a single night, and that is where the Boss 429 found its second breath. When fitted with shorter rear gearing and proper drag tires, the Mustang changed character. Traction transformed frustration into momentum. The heavy nose still mattered, but now the rear tires could finally translate torque into motion instead of smoke. Launches became cleaner, more controlled. The engine no longer felt like it was dragging the car forward, it felt like it was driving it. With the right setup, the Boss 429 began cutting deeper into the 13-second zone. Consistent runs appeared in the low 13-second range, with trap speeds climbing toward 108 miles per hour. Still heavy, still demanding, but now competitive in a way that matched its reputation. The car required respect, discipline, and strength from the driver. When mishandled, it punished. When driven correctly, it delivered. But the ZL1 did not stand still. With slicks and optimized gearing, the Camaro crossed into another realm entirely. Weight reduction, already its greatest advantage, became devastating. Launches turned brutal. The engine screamed higher, longer, harder. Elapsed times dropped into the high 11-second range, and trap speeds crept beyond 120 miles per hour. At that point, the Camaro was no longer racing muscle cars. It was hunting race cars. The difference was potential. The Boss 429 improved incrementally. The ZL1 scaled exponentially. Every adjustment unlocked more violence, more speed, more separation. The aluminum block tolerated modifications without dragging the chassis down. Less mass meant every improvement mattered more, and yet, there was a price. The ZL1 demanded perfection. High-octane racing fuel was mandatory. Miss the tune and the engine would destroy itself without warning. Cold starts were cruel. Traffic was torture. The Camaro was a predator that hated captivity. It belonged on the strip, not the street. The Boss, by comparison, remained usable. Difficult, heavy, loud, but survivable. It could be driven. The ZL1 could only be unleashed. This was the twist. The Boss 429 could be sharpened. The ZL1 could be weaponized. And that distinction decided everything that followed. By the time the smoke settled, one truth became impossible to ignore. These two machines were never meant to rule the same world. They shared a decade, a market, and a myth, but they answered to different gods. On the street, the Boss 429 Mustang carried authority. Not speed alone, but presence. It could idle through town without fouling plugs. It could survive heat, traffic, and abuse that would leave more delicate engines wounded. The torque came in thick waves, usable and intimidating. When the throttle opened, the car surged forward with brutal honesty. Heavy steering, heavy clutch, heavy everything. This was a machine that reminded the driver, every second, that power had weight and consequences. The boss was not easy, but it was real. It could be driven daily by someone brave enough. It could roll up to a light, stare down anything else on the road, and make a statement before the race ever began. It was a street king not because it always won, but because it was always there, available, visible, loud. The ZL1 Camaro was something else entirely. On the street, it was miserable, hot, temperamental, angry at low speed. The engine hated compromise. It demanded racing fuel, constant attention, and a driver who understood that every mistake carried a price. In traffic, it suffered. In town, it threatened. This was not a car you lived with. It was a car you planned around. But take it to the strip, and everything changed. On the track, the ZL1 was an executioner. Lightweight, explosive power delivery, short elapsed times that made other muscle cars feel obsolete. When conditions were right and the driver knew what they were doing, the Camaro did not race. It eliminated. 12-second passes became routine. 11-second runs appeared with frightening ease. This was dominance without debate. The verdict was not about which was better. It was about what each was built to do. The Boss 429 ruled the street through intimidation and endurance. The ZL1 ruled the strip through speed and finality. One was a hammer, the other was a blade, and blades do not belong in traffic. The Boss 429 Mustang and the ZL1 Camaro did not just mark the peak of the muscle car era, they marked the moment it went too far. These were machines built without fear of consequence, in a time when engineers were allowed to chase power without asking permission. And because of that, they could never last. By 1971, the walls were closing in. Insurance companies had learned the truth. Emissions regulations tightened like a noose. Fuel prices whispered of a future where waste would be punished. Engines like these, brutal and unapologetic, became liabilities overnight. Production ended. Programs were canceled. What had been celebrated was now controlled. But legends do not die quietly. The Boss 429 remains a symbol of Ford's defiance. A NASCAR heart forced into a street body. Heavy, overbuilt, intimidating even at rest. It represents endurance, stubbornness, and the belief that power should be able to survive abuse. The ZL1 stands for something rarer. Pure intent, an engine created with no concern for comfort, longevity, or compromise. Built to win quickly and decisively, then disappear. Modern muscle cars chase their shadows. Superchargers replace displacement. Computers replace courage. The numbers are higher now, but the danger is gone. Nothing today feels as illegal as these cars felt when they were new. Nothing today feels like it escaped the factory before someone could stop it. The quarter mile remembers. The sound remembers. The people who saw these cars run remember. And that is why this debate never ends. Not because the outcome is unclear, but because the era was irreplaceable. The Boss 429 and the ZL1 were not just fast, they were warnings, and America ignored them, just long enough to create something unforgettable.